Texas.
To keep the interest of the people.
My mother-in-law just left, and she left me this soap.
Dial.
Is that interesting? Is that interesting?
Oh
Do
man,
you still use bars of soap, or do you use the squish out? You use bars of
Dial is
soap.
the budget soap that never goes away. My grandma always used to have that.
Lasts forever.
That thing that's gonna last like 2 months. One bar, the little golden bar my grandma always used to have us wash with.
I gotta shave my head with it. It goes quicker than you think. See, we can be interesting without a game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh Lord, I guess that depends on what you're interested in.
So who uses a bar of soap versus the bottle of soap?
Oh, bar of soap is you get your money's worth. The other kind is a ripoff though. They got less in there, like the squeeze out kind. There's less in there.
They're taking you, man.
Huh.
I put my squeeze out kind on one of those little scrunchies. You only need a little dab and it goes a long way. So yeah.
In the words of Jimmy Buffett, a little dab will do you.
Yeah.
You know what?
Interesting. So Malcolm and Rob are still rolling old school.
Well, I have sensitive skin. I'm a sensitive man with sensitive skin. All right. So I am allergic. I have an allergic reaction to Irish Spring. I will break out if Irish Spring even touches my hand. I need Dove Sensitive. Patricia laughs at me, but I do.
I'm Old Spice because I like their Super Bowl commercials.
Ooh.
That's what converted me.
Okay.
Yeah. I used to use the just like the regular like girl smelling stuff that Kristen used, just generic, like this smells like a woman. And then I saw an Old Spice commercial and I was like, well, let's see what this is all about. And then I was like, ooh, my soap smells like cologne. Now I don't have to wear cologne.
Well, there you go.
I've always stick with Dove, but whenever I lose my deodorant, I do sometimes grab Patricia's Secret deodorant. She drives her crazy. But hey, I don't notice a difference.
You steal Patricia's deodorant?
Yeah, like when you misplace your deodorant, it drives her crazy for some reason. I don't know why.
For a good reason.
It's strong enough for a man, but made for a woman. You can use it. That's the tagline.
Armpits are not meant to be shared. No,
I'm with you.
Do you share toothbrushes?
There's no germs.
I was just gonna ask that.
Toothbrush? Oh no! I don't do that. I don't do that. I don't do toothbrush. But ain't nothing wrong with deodorant though.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, there was a Sunday that I forgot to put deodorant on, and Rob had deodorant in his locker and let me borrow his. And then there was another Sunday that I forgot to put deodorant on, and I went into the restroom in the offices and they had like spray for the bathroom, and I sprayed it in my armpits and sent Kristen a picture.
There is also a really old stick of deodorant in one of those drawers in there.
Oh, really?
Ooh.
Well, that's good to know. I just sprayed Glade in my armpit.
Yeah.
We don't need a game.
Yeah. Hey, do y'all?
I told you we don't need
You're that professional.
Do y'all? There was a joke going on when I was a kid. Like, if you had bad armpit smell or something, you'd say, "Oh man, your armpit smells so bad, you made right guard turn left." Y'all remember right guard?
All right. I personally am ready to move on from personal hygiene.
Welcome to Second Take at Eastlake, a podcast of Eastlake Community Church in Irmo, South Carolina. You are invited to join us any Sunday at 9 or 11.
Hey, that wasn't a bad free riff though.
No, you guys really, yeah. I feel like we could probably charge for this
because I had a prop that I didn't know I needed.
Yeah, we can improvise on anything. Maybe we should ask our listeners what they'd like us to improvise on for next week. So instead of a game, you just give us a subject and we'll just riff. See if we're any good.
Ask a pastor. Nothing's off limits, I guess.
So let's get into the meat of this, I guess, the actual topic of our podcast, because this was a really tough one. And so just in case you guys don't know, we're going through the book of Exodus, which is like the book that a bunch of haters out there, haters might be a strong word, but people that don't that want to say that Christians are a bunch of bigots and blah 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 would point to a bunch of passages in Exodus. And so we're going through and we're just tackling these subjects, and the context is key. Because if you read any of this as if it's modern day, it does not make sense. And this is not Rob trying to just justify some tough passages. This is literally going back to the original language, looking at the way it was said, looking at the culture within the language, and making sense of some of these really hard verses. So I think it's really awesome, but it definitely doesn't grow your church.
Well, I think it does, but in a different way, because I agree with you that it doesn't make it feel warm and fuzzy and everybody's running to it, but it grows your church in the sense that when we dive into these deep passages, not just like I did on Sunday, but like we do regularly.
Yeah.
Ray's done it. Other pastors have done it over the years. It grows the level of understanding and depth of faith of those that are committed to following Jesus, even if they're uncomfortable. So long term, I think it does grow your church. In the short term, it can very easily cause misunderstanding, frustration, and even departure. Short term. I mean, it's a real thing. We've had it happen when we did Gracism, the 2 times we've done Gracism. Anyone who's been new to us, in between our Gracism times, I was like, oh, wait, what? And again, I'm not saying that as a negative on them. I'm just saying it can come as a surprise.
Yeah.
Try to be very open and honest about the fact we're going to tackle Exodus 21, which is a landmine with landmines attached to it.
Yeah, so Exodus 21, it was basically the whole chapter, Exodus 21, right?
All the way through 22, about 16.
Yeah, so if you missed it, go back and read it, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about if you missed it. But this is a don't miss sermon.
And read it in several versions, because one of the things we'll get into here on the podcast, and we got into in the sermon, is depending on when the version was translated, not made, it's just translating, or the method with which they used for the translation of the Hebrew into the English, you will find 2 words in there. It'll either say Hebrew slave or Hebrew servant. And it's very important to read those several versions and then ask yourself, why are there 2 different words? And what was the original word? And that's a really important question to ask, because in this case, as with some others, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Which word is more accurate to the original intent? Yeah.
That's good. Michelle, you were hosting online, weren't you?
I was.
What was it like?
Oh, it was good. Let's see. One of our folks who's a librarian at a school posted how grateful she is that we go in and cover these kinds of things and look at the original languages and, kind of ferret out what the real meanings are. And so I would say it's probably a mixed response. The people who were probably taken aback or overwhelmed probably didn't say as much online. They would just be quiet. But I was completely excited by it, because I just felt like these are the kinds of passages that all my life as a believer, I have not known how to respond to.
Yeah.
And so, you could be a brand new Christian and listen to Rob's sermon and take a couple notes on, hey, there's 2 different words here, and that explains a lot, and be able to answer somebody's objections to your faith, which I think is really cool. So I'm glad that we tackle these things. So the online people were appreciative, and some of them really went out of their way to express that.
So let's say somebody, I love that. So let's say somebody was watching, was in person or watching online, and they were taken back. I mean, they didn't like it, and they still don't like it today. Is that okay?
I'm going to give a qualified answer, because the answer is yes.
That's what I thought. That's what I was thinking. But
yes, if there's an if they're willing to continue to wrestle with why they don't like it. They don't even have to come all the way around to agreement. But why is it bothering you? This is the question I'd like to ask anyone who's wrestling with it, because somebody had to ask me these questions myself years ago on my journey. Why does that bother you? you've got to get to the bottom of why that bothers you. Because if you don't, there's no freedom for you. And it could be just because you don't like the speaker, me, whoever it is. And then you got to deal with that. You got to figure out, okay, well, I got to get beyond that. Or it could be because something that you have held that you might not even know was in there just got touched.
Yeah.
Or it could just be that that's just what you do when you don't know how to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to go on that journey to figure out which one of those it is.
Yeah.
And it can take you years, by the way.
Yeah, it could. It's a process. I feel like so often we, and I'm including myself in this, go to worship services, listen to sermons, looking for affirmation subconsciously of what we already think and already believe. And when something comes out of the ordinary that contradicts what we think and already believe, we think that person's blaspheming. But why wouldn't we approach a Sunday or a sermon or a teaching and say, okay, what's in this for me? I have not arrived. There are things that I can learn, and I haven't learned in a while. It doesn't feel good all the time, but I might. Yeah, I love that. I'm curious, Malcolm, what was it like for you to listen to? I know you're doing youth stuff. Did you get to hear everything or?
Oh yeah, I always listen to the sermons Sunday night. Wife yelling at me about doing the dishes, so I put in, my headphones and I listen to the sermons and the worship and everything. By the way to represent worship this week. It was pretty dope.
Hey.
All right. So I mean, for me personally, it takes me back to times in Bible school. I just learned how important it was to just really look at the biggest words or the bold words in the text and just marinate on that and go into that and study that. What are the synonyms connected to that, or what's the original word and everything, and just slow it down. So it took me back to that, and it made me appreciate that time in my life where I was just being pushed to do that and everything. But I would say, people that don't want to hear that are frustrated about it, because I remember when I was just like, the gospel, I mean, can we just stay on John 3:16 for God so loved the world? I mean, can we just stay with, like, I thought God died for our sins, Jesus died for our sins, he rose, we saved. It's simple, it's clean, it's Sunday morning, I'm with my family, I'm going to Cracker Barrel afterwards. Can I just get a simple, easy word? So, about the, like I've been there before, so why does the gospel, why we gotta complicate it, because that's how I used to feel, and I think that's how some people feel sometimes when it's like, why do we gotta wrestle? I go to church so that I can just hear the a fresh reminder of the gospel, and like I said, the New Testament gospel and everything like that. Why are we including this, and everything? So I've been there before, and I can see how people would think that, but we're trying to make this a safe place. We're trying to make this a place where you can a safe place where you can go and you can feel secure and loved, but you got to grow too. And the growth part about it is what, we sometimes forget. And, this is where, we grow and we're going to be challenged. And Bible literacy is a big part of us being challenged. Now, sometimes we forget that. So yeah, man, that's what I was thinking about it,
It's good.
That's cool, man.
I love that you use the word gospel, because I've heard this before from sermons where Ray's preached, where Michelle's preached, where I preach, where people will actually say, well, just why isn't there any gospel in there? Friend, if the gospel isn't about justice, reconciliation, and redemption, what's it about?
Yeah.
My whole message on Sunday, for instance, using this, again, I can think of a myriad of other times where it's been other people preaching where I've heard that statement. But let me just say, in case you feel that way about this one and you're listening, I started and ended the message intentionally with the concept of Jesus calling us out of servanthood into friendship. That's the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
The gospel was peppered throughout this entire thing, because along the way I pleaded with myself first, and all of us secondarily, because I want to plead with me first, to look out for the people that are the most likely to be mistreated at all costs. Because that's exactly what Jesus did. That's the gospel. Mm-hmm. It's really, Malcolm, thank you for saying that. It's not just John 3:16. Mm-hmm. It's he called us to a justice mission, mm-hmm. and a free the oppressor mission, oppressed mission, where we even love our enemies. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just like, when I look at that, I go, I remember being there and I'm sad.
Yeah.
Because as we dig into the Bible is about so much to do with justice and reconciliation and healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I just hope people can grab that, not because I said it, but because Jesus did.
Yep. Yeah, it is. It 100% is. What about this was a hard concept. You did a great job of communicating it, but in case people are struggling with this, I wanted to kind of hit it again. So this passage talks about owning slaves, servants. I know servants is the word, but depending on the version that people have
Right.
grown up listening to, I'll say that.
You'll see the word
It
slave.
talks- You'll
Yeah.
see the word slave depending on
Yeah.
the version. So let's go back to the original text and just talk again about what the Bible is actually saying, because it is not saying to own slaves. And
Michelle?
anybody can chime in on this. I know Rob did the deep dive into it, but I think we have to hit this again just because we're here online together.
Let me give the word. Let me give the Hebrew word, and then I'll let all of us unpack it from there. So we have to understand that the Hebrew word is eved. And eved implies something different than slavery in the way that we think it. Eved implies, I'm going to read it exactly, implies the idea of a mutual relationship where both parties cared for and looked out for each other with a common goal in mind. Okay, so when we talk about the servant, when we talk about an Israelite servant at the time, and again, I'm not saying that this is even the ideal, even in this case. Just please hear that.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not saying this is a good
God's
situation.
ideal would have been that they not even have to do this, but this was a way of making sure that there was provision, because fallen man was going to do fallen things. And so here's what he's saying. He's saying you enter into a voluntary relationship where your freedom was never at stake. Hear that. They did not own the person the way that people owned people in slavery as we know it in our historical record here in the United States. They owned the rights to their labor. This is an illustration I'm going to give real fast, and then I want to hear it from everyone else. And it's the closest one to modern day, and I didn't want to unpack it in the sermon. When you sign an NFL contract, whatever race you are, you sign almost an eved relationship. Almost. It's not a perfect illustration. You sign a 4-year contract where your labor as a football player is owned by the football franchise that purchased your labor as a football. They cannot control the house you live in, where you go to dinner, what you do during your free time, which is mandated by the contract that you have free time. That's more what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, because it was an agrarian society, it wasn't as beneficial as that. That's why that's a little faulty. But I do want you to hear that the similarities are it's a labor contract, not a your humanity contract.
Mm-hmm.
So you were in essence free in the off work hours to do as you pleased.
Mm-hmm.
And that was real. That really did happen. Now, unfortunately, that's never really played out well in human history where it actually went the way it was supposed to go. So thinking of that concept for Michelle, especially, I know that she's in seminary and has probably dug into some of this. I know Malcolm from Bible school dug into this. What are your thoughts?
So when I think about things like this, I think one of the problems that we have in the modern day church is that we don't read the Bible with the whole arc of the Bible. And we don't understand that God has always made allowances for our humanity and met us where we were in every age. And so what I see is God constantly trying to move his people forward, to treat each other with dignity and love and respect, whether it is a racial thing, whether it's, whether you're a man or a woman, whatever it is, God is trying to move that forward. And we sometimes will take things and think that that's God's prescription. Mm-hmm. So, when Jesus was talking to the Pharisees about divorce, they were like, but Moses said we could get a divorce. And Jesus said, yes, God allowed for divorce because your hearts were hard. And so, just because something appears in the Bible does not mean that it's a prescription for how we're allowed to act today. But if we understand that in that society, what God was doing was setting up safeguards because he figured his people were not going to be immune from, getting in trouble, having to sell themselves into servanthood. And so knowing that we are sinful people, God said, here's some guidelines to try and keep that situation to be the best that it can be. And so I think that any other way to look at it is really just cherry picking that particular scripture and not understanding the whole context.
So Michelle, what are you trying to say? Like when I look on online for a topic on divorce, and you know, I get my my Bible Gateway, you know how we all go to Bible Gateway and the subject right there, and I see all the verses, all right, and I go, I look at the one that most looks good to me, all right, and that's mine. You saying I can't use what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that?
Called proof texting. Yeah.
Yeah, we all been there before. I was like, man, all right, that don't sound good, but I got all these 10 verses. What sounds right? Okay, encouragement. Okay, like, for me, you know what I look at, because I like what you said about like the cherry pick and everything. It's kind of like I compare it to like when people are looking at, you know, the Bible, and it's like, where do I see myself in this? You know, do I see myself in this? You know, I know a lot of my African American friends who, you know, they don't really identify with a religion, but it's almost like kind of the woke culture is their religion, because it's like this is the only like attitude, you know, being like this, I feel like I can do something for the world. So you just, you know, you have that kind of, you know, angry assertiveness, and you know, it's cool to discover in the Bible that it speaks about these things, because there's people that will say, you know, where in the Bible does it speak about race? You know, and it's like, you know, God mentioned
Everywhere.
You know, when God speaks about most people, he says, you know, the Pharaoh was Egyptian, you know, the Hebrews. So he speaks to the person and their ethnicity, and you know, the clashing there. And if you go in the Word, you can see that, and you see how God you know, dealt with it. But another thing I see too is that we forget to, like, we look at the Bible and we're like, I don't see myself in this Bible. I don't see how this is for me. I don't get it. But I feel like you got to see who it's written to first, and then see how it applies to you. It's kind of like, you know, something I gave to the youth. I'm like, if a person who's older came in here, you know, a lot older, and sat in here during my message, and then afterward they're like, you know, hey, I get what you said to them, everything, but how is for me? I said, listen, you got to understand all these 14 to 18-year-olds and what's going on in their life and what they need to hear to understand why I'm speaking, how I'm speaking to them with the tone, with the visuals I provide. Once you understand them, you understand what I'm saying, and then you're going to say, okay, now how can I apply what Malcolm said to me, you know, and everything. So it's the same thing. You got to figure out what's going on in these people's lives in the Bible, and then, okay, now let me see how it's for me. So that's something that's big that I've trained myself to do, especially with the Old Testament, you know, because it's so specific to, you know, the historical context is so important.
That's good,
Well,
man.
And that's what I love about Eastlake, and we've said this for years, long before even our current iteration of staff, is that the Bible is not written to us, but it's written for us. And so, you know, and that's something that seminary teaches you that. Yeah, that's where I finally really learned that. And it was when I was deep into seminary class where I realized I have to make sure I understand which of this is a universal principle that applies across all cultures. And there are things that do that, by the way. There's non-negotiables.
Yep.
Which of the things were the audience that received it needed to hear that because of the overarching principle that they were violating. And then figure for their context, that's how they solved it. And then in this context, you solve it like this. And in this context, you solve it like this. And I think for me, what's the most alarming is when we take just the English word for it. And I'm not asking everyone to become Hebrew and Greek scholars, because I'm not one of those either. But there are enough resources out there for us to look deeper. Because the tragedy of why this has got two different, I have to say this, I made a note to myself beforehand that when we got into this part of the conversation, make sure I repeated this. The tragedy of why there is Hebrew slave and Hebrew servant is why this conversation is so important. The word began being translated as slave after the slave trade began. So it was put in the Bible, even though the King James Version, the oldest English version of the Bible,
Said servant.
translated to say servant because they understood that that's what the word meant. Then when it came time 30 or 40 years later to justify this chattel slavery, they said, no, slave. See, God said okay to slaves. And so it's important to dig a little deeper sometimes
Mhm.
And find it. Now, again, I'm not saying you have to be a Hebrew scholar, but you can find resources that say, hey, in the Hebrew, this means this, not this. And then to apply it to our context and realize that then Jesus came to set all the captives free. So you can't make the statement, you cannot make the argument that in today's day and age, that post Jesus, okay, that even that kind of slavery or servanthood is endorsed. Because even in the New Testament, you see Paul writing to Philemon saying, free our brother who is a slave. And it's really, really important that we get that, because humanity is we're so evil sometimes. Okay. And if you heard me call you evil, I'm not calling you evil. I'm saying we are evil sometimes. And we will take it and make it say, and so for 400 years, we made the Bible read like Malcolm should be purchased by one of us because he's another than us. That is disgusting. And we have to come to terms with the reality that we're still picking up the pieces of that in evangelical circles and in cultural circles. And then be Jesus about it, like gracious, loving, firm.
Yep.
You know, I think one of the most important things in considering this conversation, if you are a person that this touched something in you or something that Rob said made you feel defensive. I understand that. I used to feel that way. But I would encourage you to get curious. Because in our country, if we're going to survive as a democracy, regardless of what you believe for your faith or anything else, we have got to be able to have conversations with one another. One of the things I've always loved about Eastlake is we have people from different church backgrounds. We have people that have different theologies, and we allow our theologies to be challenged on staff. So we're not just challenging other people. We will receive challenge from somebody who thinks differently from us across the table in the staff office. And the way to handle that is to just be curious, not get mad, not feel like you have to justify whatever the feeling is. No one's trying to take anything from us, but we need to understand, why is that it made me angry? And I need to find out more. And I think if people will do that, then they can they need to detach from the subject a little bit, because Rob was not preaching to a specific person sitting in a chair.
Even though many people might have felt as though he did. If you go back and watch with your filter, with your...
Well, no, I take it. No, you're wrong, Michelle. I was preaching to one person, myself. Every illustration that I used, I pointed to me.
Yeah.
I said, this is what I know about me. And so I have to believe that there are some in the room, and I didn't have anyone in mind at all.
Right.
But I know that there are me's in the room. You know, so for me, it's like, you know, Michelle, what you're saying is so good, because here's the irony of being frustrated about this message, or frustrated with me. How can you be frustrated with our responsibility for this week? I'm sorry, I've had some ones that I legitimately, I can see why that would tick you off. This was our responsibility for this week. You ready? This is really controversial. What in me needs to change? And then how can I be a friend to those around me? So everything we did pointed us to look in the mirror, address what needs to be addressed, whatever it is. I don't know what your thing is. Address what needs to be. Some of you are showing me when we have conversations what your thing might be. And I don't say that judgmentally. I say that like, well, let me help you. I can see it by your response. And so what's so controversial or awful about saying, let's go how can I be a friend to the people around me?
Yeah.
Well,
I really want to know.
And that's actually a good point, because sometimes, you know, we don't see things in ourselves. Everybody else in the room can see a behavior, a belief, you know, leaking out of us all over the place. And I remember, I think it was sometime last year, when I felt like, okay, I really feel safe enough, close enough to Ray to say, okay, what are my blind spots? What am I missing? What do you wish I wouldn't do? And it takes a level of safety in relationship to do that. But sometimes we're not self-aware of our own feelings and our own behaviors. And so, you know, it's hard for us to recognize that in ourselves.
Yeah. I think it's interesting how and this is a little bit of a term, but not a whole lot, how depending on what you've been discipled into, you receive this sermon differently. And here's what I mean by that.
Oh,
I grew up
ooh.
in the church. Yeah, I grew up in the church, and in my Baptist background, it was very much turn or burn, like get to know Jesus. But once you get to know Jesus, it didn't feel like there was a lot more
Yeah.
other than now let's get other people to know Jesus. So all I really wanted to hear in a sermon is how to tell more people about Jesus and the thing, Jesus. And it was like it was that focus. Okay, we've got you, now we're going to go get other people.
Yeah.
But if I didn't grow up in the church, and now that I'm older, I have lots of friends who don't go to church, didn't grow up in the church. You know what they're doing? They're concerned that they don't want to be wrong. And so they're trying to figure out, are these Christians crazy or not? And they're doing more research on passages like Exodus 21 than the people who grew up in church, because all we focus on is, hey, I'm good, I want to help other people be good. The other people are like, I don't want to be them, and let's make sure I'm not crazy. Oh, look, this one says that we should have slaves. And like, so what I'm trying to get to is many non-believers know these passages better than the believers, because these are the ones that they gravitate to. They give a false sense of their rightness on what they already think they believe, if that makes sense. And so when we teach on this, and Rob teaches on this, you need to know this. I need to know this. And I need to know why it says servant versus, or slave versus servant. I need to know what the context was. This to me was one of the most important messages that we could hear in today's culture.
Amen.
I really do. I mean, I'm going to be around people tonight playing music that I guarantee you know this passage. I guarantee you.
And they weaponize it, if they're not Christians a lot of times, to kind of say, look at how outdated and misogynistic and how oppressive this Old Testament God is. And it's like, when we take what I tried to do on Sunday, and what we always try to do, any one of us that stands on that stage, is take God's word and say, here's what God is saying. Here's what it's taught me. Here's hopefully what it can teach all of us. Because what I saw in this passage was a really hard topic. And believe me, you all know how much trepidation I went into this. Okay. I saw a really hard topic that showed me how to love people better. Because that was the intent of God. Whether that's what mankind did with it or not is irrelevant. God was like, I want you to look out for these people. And I want you to treat them with dignity. And I want you to actually send them away with more than they came in with. And I want you to care for them in ways that the people around you are going to look at you and go, what is happening? And that's the Bible.
Y'all know what I think about? It's like, all right, so for me, like, I'm thinking like practically, like, how do I brace myself for verses like this, or whole passages, like in Job, all the stuff that happened to Job, all that implication, all the stuff, how God acted in there and everything. And my thing is, the worst time to read a passage like Job or these passages, or when I'm going through something, or when somebody's wronged me and I get in church and I hear about this, and I'm like, yo, like this, like I'm going through, I ain't trying to, so what does it look like on a consistent basis to break down hard passages like this? So when we going through something, Exodus 21, that's not the first time we ever hear about it. When we going through something bad, we've been in it. Like what is a routine, something to where we can really chop this up on a consistent basis, or where it's already in our system, so it's not such a shock to us when we hear it in church.
It's read your Bible. And it's not just read your Bible, it's read your Bible as a student of the Bible. You don't have to be a Bible student in a classroom to become a student of the Bible.
And ask questions.
Yeah, ask questions of it and of people.
Right. Well, I think in the way that we teach, we mix up the way that we teach. I mean, sometimes we'll teach on a subject, sometimes we teach exegetically. So what I love about this series is that we are just going right through the verses as they're there. We're not cherry picking them. We're not like, this is the text, this is how it was written, this is what you see when you go there. And so there's value in both ways. I mean, sometimes you need to learn something about a particular subject, and so you do look up a word or a concept and study that. But there's also real value in this, because frankly, as a young Christian, I would skip over these passages. They made me uncomfortable. I didn't know how to process them. I knew I had faith in God, but like, I can't answer these questions. And so I'm really glad to be in a place where we're not afraid to tackle the harder ones, where we're not afraid to talk about every verse, no matter what in it is so weird.
It's so good. So one of the things that and Rob gave a warning. He goes, "Here comes a trigger word." and he said it, and the trigger word that he used was privilege. And you could feel it. You could feel a pin drop in the room. And the thing that I want to discuss, Malcolm just walking away.
Malcolm, are you okay? Uh-oh.
He really did leave.
Yeah, he'll be back. He'll be back.
Okay.
Probably hears.
He fell off his chair.
One of the things that I guess is so hard for me to understand is, why do we, when we hear one person share their story, do we think it's all of a sudden our story? So when Rob says something that says, I have discovered that I have privilege in my life, why does it make everybody feel like, well, how dare he say that? Because I don't have that. Like, Rob was never talking about you. He was talking about Rob, right?
Well, I'll be honest. I was talking about my white brothers and sisters in general. And I was talking about them from my position of understanding. Okay, so I wasn't accusing them of anything, but I was stating, I do think white privilege is real. And I'm sorry if that offends you. Actually, I'm not. I'm not sorry if that offends you. Okay. I think it's real, and I think it's systematic, and I think it's built into our system. I don't think anyone in the modern day set that system up. I don't think any of the people that hear my voice are culpable of writing anything down that created it. Okay. Maybe some people in their 90s or 100s, maybe, I don't know. I'm not even going to point at them. But I was careful, you're correct, to make sure that I own the fact that I have discovered it. But I'm going to say this, Philip, and I know that this is hard. To my white brothers and sisters, our African-American brothers and sisters and our friends of color need us to understand that we do start out with an advantage. We do. And it's okay to be uncomfortable with that. Don't get mad at the messenger. I used to not believe it. And I've had enough life now that I look around and I go, you know what? I was a pretty poor kid, so I don't have privilege like, silver spoons,
And that's what a lot of people think you mean when you say that.
No, it's not. What I mean, though, is I was poor white, which is easier than being poor black. I know that's uncomfortable. But I wasn't.
It's the truth.
But it's true.
I'm comfortable.
Because I still had opportunities that my African-American brothers and sisters didn't have. Now, I had less opportunities than a whole lot of my white brothers and sisters, and even some African-Americans had more than I did. But as a whole, I know that's uncomfortable. I hate saying it, but God's telling me don't not say it. But you're correct. I wasn't accusing anyone else of holding back. I was talking about how I'm not going to hold back. And I can only decide for me what I'm going to do. And in some ways, I had a friend send me a message, and he'd be fine. I won't say his name, but he'd be fine if he ever heard this, because we're friends still. But he accused me of only caring because I have a black son.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, that would be enough, though, wouldn't it? It's not the only reason, but wouldn't that be enough of a reason for me to be passionate about this? Like, yeah. But it started long before that. And so what I want to hear, I'm going to read something, and then I'm going to shut up. But here's what I wish I had said in my sermon, but I couldn't say all the things I wanted to say. I posted this on my Facebook so people could see it. God calls us to give up our privilege, which is a right, advantage, opportunity, or immunity granted to us that is available to only our group of people, whoever we are, wherever we are. God calls us to give that up or leverage it on behalf of any individual who's not experiencing it. So here's my final thought on it. Jesus did that for us. So I ask again, what's the problem with releasing our privilege? We didn't have a problem with Jesus leaving heaven and releasing his. Wherever I have it, I want to release it. Wherever I don't have it, I don't have to release it. I don't have it. But I can't deny that it's there.
Yeah.
That's a lot, but there's no easy way to answer these questions quickly.
What do you think about it, Michelle?
Well, I actually was thinking I wanted to hear what Malcolm thought.
Well, why would I think? You know, my little man is right here, and then my other little man just came home. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Corbin, what you think? Chilling?
Got an answer for us.
Yeah.
He said, "Yeah, get that camera out of my face." All right, so
Let's just hope Malcolm's wearing pants right now.
I am. That's not one of them Zoom meetings. All right, hey, what's Caden? Yeah, Caden. All right.
What's your name?
As far as like privilege and everything, I feel like if we really look at it, we all have privilege in some way. The most glaring, systematic way is white privilege. But I look at my life, having a mom, I grew up with a single mom, but having a mom that had the conviction of I don't want to raise my child in inner city Chicago. So to move me out to the suburbs where I have more opportunities than my other half brothers and sisters who stayed back, and they didn't have a good mother, and my father wasn't in their life. So they, were in and out of foster care, and that really impacted their lives. So when I look at where I am right now in my career and with my family and everything, I'm like, yes, some of it was by my hand, but a lot of it was by my blessings and the privileges I had of growing up in a Chicago suburb versus an inner city suburb. And that takes away nothing from me, but it's a reality that, I was blessed in privilege in that way. And I just wish that more people just saw that and were not as offended by it. We're not trying to take anything away from your work ethic. We're just saying that, hey, Malcolm working hard in suburban Chicago, is a lot easier than Malcolm working hard in inner city Chicago. And it's just, so we're not trying to say kind of call it your work ethic. We're just trying to call it how it is. Like, that's how it is. And this is how we learn to cover people who are in the inner city, who are in situations. We have to, overextend ourselves because we have more of a natural cup that, we had nothing to do with. Our cup just started out a little fuller than theirs. So let's give a little bit more. Let's look to cover them more. That person that have an anger problem, you were blessed with more self-control than them naturally. So let's extend your self-control over them and cover them, make sure. So, that's how I look at it. And I wish more people kind of saw it that way,
Yeah.
Come on, Malcolm.
Come on, buddy.
Yeah. I told you I was going to go for a 15.
Don't drop the mic because that's a baby in your arms.
Yeah.
I threw a few assists. Then my baby, he cooked off too.
Yeah.
I think that's just the point. And I think that what happens when we hear that word privilege is that we think it takes away from the things that we've worked so hard to do. I have not had an easy life over the last decade or more. It's been really tough. And so, for somebody to say that I'm privileged might feel to me like you've had it easy. Well, I haven't had it easy, but I've had it easier than some other people in my circumstances because of, like, Malcolm said, maybe where they live or the color of their skin or their family structure. And so I think we have to really lay down the anger and embrace the fact that every one of us actually in the United States is privileged when it comes to a world stage. We just are. It's just a fact. You just look at where wealth resides. And I know we can point to ultra millionaires and we can talk all about the things that they should do differently.
Mm-hmm.
But we truly are in the world some of the most privileged people on earth. And, I think every day I feel like, oh, I'm barely making ends meet. But, I really feel challenged by the Lord. Like, how can I, maybe add 1% to my giving a year and find a place to give to that helps people who are in far worse circumstances than I am? And so I think God was really clear when he talked in the Bible about how we are to care for those people who are underprivileged. He was very clear. And the prophets speak clearly to this by saying, you're being kicked out of your homeland, Israel, because you did not take care of the poor and the widowed and the foreigner. You were selfish. And God's like, I can't bless that. And so, I want to live in his blessing.
And we're the most privileged people of all.
That's good.
And what I mean by that is Christians, whether we're an American Christian or a Christian anywhere in the world. We are the most privileged people of all because we have the privilege of being able to speak into the very throne room of God. Okay, I just want us to think about that for a minute. And so if I'm so privileged because God has given me the privilege of being called his son and his daughter, in the case of my wife and my friend Michelle and all of our spouses and kids that are females, shouldn't we do what Jesus did and lay that aside for the good of others? It doesn't matter how we got it. It doesn't matter anything. Malcolm, you said it perfectly. The moment we became children of God, sons and daughters, we received an inheritance that was so big. That means we must begin to set our own rights and comfort aside. Immediately. I'm not saying sell my house and live out in the woods with my family, unless God calls me to. I'm saying lay aside any power I said this to Ray today. He and I were talking about this week's message because if I'm gonna do this. Buckle up. I just got us started. That's all I'm gonna say. And to bring Ray into the podcast, without his permission, I'm sure he'll be fine with this. I'm gonna read it. Here's what he had to say. Our struggle is immense. The ask is great. Buckle up.
Yeah.
And the ask is the ask of those of us that are privileged Americans, some of us white, some of us African American, some of us Latina, and who are fighting against the system in the world that would want to defeat us and would want to make us selfish and pursue our rights over the rights of other people. That's the American way.
It's crazy to me that, like in Christian subculture, you can turn on K-Love. Is K-Love big over here? I don't listen.
K-Love. Ooh, they still got K-Love?
Is that a thing? What's the Christian
Anyway.
radio? But you could turn it on and you would hear a song that would say, I'm blessed. I'm so blessed. Hallelujah. I'm blessed. It'd be song after song. So God's just done this for me. Blah, 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 blah. It'd be song after song after song. But yet, for some reason, when you say the word privilege, which I get that they're not the same word, but there's no Christian song that says like, I've been given privilege by, you know what I mean? Like what?
You know the name of this podcast. You know what the name of this podcast should be? Well, no, the title of this specific one. Holy privilege. Holy privilege. Come on now, I got that holy privilege. Hey, the next time one of us complain to one another, like in group or something, over like something like first world problem, like, oh, this person cut me off in traffic. Oh, I had to drive this. Holy privilege. That's what we cut each other off. Holy privilege.
Oh, Malcolm. Well, here's the thing, and here's one of the things that I would say that goes with that. And it goes with this holy privilege. With holy privilege, sometimes comes power and positions of authority that God puts us in. And this is a statement that I made back to Ray and have made to other people this week. We have to remember that the only reason God ever gives us any power or privilege, let's put them together, is for the use of advancing his kingdom, never for our own personal gain.
That's right.
Now, he may bless us with wealth in an earthly way. He has not me yet, in an earthly way that is incredible and amazing. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is because we all know people that God has blessed with more than we could ever imagine. Be like, man, how did that happen? Most of the people in the church that I know that are like that, not in the world, but in the church that have got more wealth than I could know what to do with, give away more than I'm going to make in my lifetime.
That's true. That's the truth.
God has said, I can entrust you with this much power and this much resource because you will use it for others.
Yeah.
So let's the authority and that we have, the power that we have to bring change and invest it in other people instead of just ourselves.
I did a post this week, just this trend of like people who've been married and you show a new photo and an old photo. And we had a lot of people come through that know us outside of the church that said, man, you guys have been married 25 years. What's your secret? And one of the
25
things
years.
that is, what's that, Malcolm?
You married 25 years?
Well, we've been together 25 years.
Bro, you only like 30. My God. Woo.
But one of the things that it opened up this interesting conversation that people were shocked by my answer, and it was really our faith and wisdom that we've acquired through our faith in church. And I mean, we basically our entire lives, we've been surrounded by people that push us together, not pull us apart. So when we have an argument, it's not that the people we would talk to would say, you need to leave her, you need to leave him. The people say, okay, how are we going to work toward, but it's just that is a privilege. I wouldn't have what we have, this happy 25 years, if we didn't have faith and wisdom that came from God. So it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's not, unfortunately, news stations or whatever have weaponized that word. But to use that word, it's a very spiritual concept. It's anyway, so this is good discussion. I really love it. This is the easiest podcast I've ever had to host because we could just talk on this. Oddly enough, it is because there's so much to say. But we hope we're going to have to wrap up just because, that's the way it has to be. But this Sunday, Ray's going to be teaching, and we're going to get into this Exodus even more. And it's going to be great. Oh my gosh, Dad Malcolm.
That child, look at that baby.
I love it.
Look at those cheeks he's got.
I
Look
know.
at those cheeks.
He says, what are you guys trying to bring me into this world for?
He looked like Patricia, but he got my eye. Look at them eyes. I pop out. That's how I know it's my baby. Everything else is Patricia, though.
That's too good, man.
Well, I think there's other reasons, but anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, right. His hair texture.
Oh man.
So funny.
All right.
Well, we're gonna sign off. One thing I'll say before we do sign off is be looking out for Easter Jam at the end of this month. You're gonna hear more about it. It's coming. It's a lot of fun. Easter Jam.
Ooh,
That's
jam.
something to just kind of tease your ears with. Okay. But we love all of you guys, and we will check out and see you guys next time.
Hey, Rob.
You're still here, Malcolm. Don't worry about it. You're not gonna run nowhere. Hold on a minute. Wait till they start recording. Talk to me.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Eastlake Community Church is an intentional, multicultural community empowered by the Holy Spirit. We passionately pursue a loving relationship with God and everyone Jesus was sent to die for, here, near, and far.